What's up guys? Yesterday on Facebook I asked everyone what video they wanted to see for today, and everyone gave me some great suggestions, and I'm most likely going to get to all those suggestions as soon as I can. It might be coming maybe Friday or starting next week. I don't really know what the order of anything is going to be. I've been really focused on trying to get different content from what's already out there for you guys, just because I feel like we already have kind of deck profiles and matches, and you know, DM073 is really good at always uploading matches. I used to do deck profiles like left and right for every single ruler, so I kind of wanted to start bringing something different to the table. Matt always does like their new Dark Depth series, which is really awesome because then you get to actually hear discussion and stuff. And so I kind of want something like that. Discussion's always been really interesting to me. And for today, I decided I'd kind of go, I'd kind of add the discussion to another pro tip video. So this is going to be a pro tip video on how to identify the meta, and specifically also how to build against it. I've always been the kind of person that doesn't like playing the meta itself. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing the meta. I much rather, how do I say this? Okay, for example, a new set's coming out. We have Twilight Wanderer coming out in December. When I look at all those cards, I don't think, oh, what's going to be the best way to play this format? I think, what's going to be the best way to play this format, and how do I counter that best way? I find it a lot more interesting to try to build against something that you're anticipating is going to be really well, and having a very solid main deck to kind of fight against everything in general, and then maybe just have a side deck that's also really good against everything else, so that you can kind of repair some matchups that you might be having trouble with, rather than just build meta and have kind of like a very expected list that people might be already ready to side against. So this is going to kind of be my way of showing you guys how I identify the meta in my locals per se, because it is different everywhere. I don't want anyone to see the decks I talk about now and think this is how it is everywhere. This is just my personal locals, and I just want to kind of give you the tips on how to identify what the proper siding would be maybe, or what cards work against those certain cards really well, so that you can apply that general knowledge itself to your locals, and that way, even if it's not the same cards, you can understand the thought process behind it, so that if I can teach you the thought process, you can apply it to anything rather than kind of just copying a certain card I'm talking about for another certain card and not really understanding why it is that the card works well against it. So that's what this video is going to be about. I hope it helps everyone. And let me just hop straight into it. So my locals is very Blazer heavy. There's two different types of it. There's Blazer Knights, which I haven't been seeing a lot much of, so I don't have a lot of examples of those cards right now. But Blazer Knights generally is a white-red Blazer deck that consists of having the perfect turn 2 play, essentially, because you can always have turn 2 Gwaine, because you play all Lightstones, and turn 2 Lancelot, so either or, which has always been the problem with Knights. If you didn't hit your light redstones, you weren't able to fully always have the proper mana curve for the game. And so Blazer Knights is a very strong deck because you always have the perfect 1-drop, then a 2-drop, then a 3-drop, and you just keep keeping tempo that way. The reason why I don't think that deck is extremely dangerous is because of Dark Pulse. This is one card that I like using against it. I'm using Kaguya, of course, right now. People have been seeing me talk about it on the Facebook groups. I'm not going to be giving out the list, but there's going to be a couple things I talk about in this video that might give away kind of the angle I'm leaning towards, which I'm okay with. I just don't want to give out the list right now because I don't know, it's just really like, I always give out my list, so please don't be mad at me. I post all my lists online, but this has been very like kind of just this sweet kind of awesome deck that I think I thought of, and well, not I thought of. I've seen other variants of people trying this kind of deck out there. It's just I'm really happy with the one I have. So it's just been, maybe one day I'll put it out there after ARG or something. But for now, I just wanted to kind of remain my little secret. But so Dark Pulse is something I side against because all those Lancelots and Gwaines just absolutely die to Dark Pulse. The Percivals can't do anything about it. It only pretty much leaves Garrett and Bedivere alive, which isn't too much of a problem because Hester and Carmilla and any other like Stoning to Death, a lot of dark cards kill those cards anyway. So of course, for anyone that doesn't know, Dark Pulse destroys all level 2 or lower resonators on the field. That's essentially every important knight that you want to get rid of. All those stacked up Lancelots and Gwaines that they have, buffing all those Lancelots is just swoops them all away with one card. And of course, because they don't play green, there is no counter to it. They can maybe dream of Juliet, one of them, if they played it, but that's not really too big of an issue anyway. So Dark Pulse has always been really good, in my opinion, against that kind of deck. Moving on to the other Blazer that I see a lot of at my locals, it's one that consists of course, playing Guinevere, which the Knights play as well. Guinevere is always a great card. I've been talking about this card since it came out. You just get to plus off any type of removal. If they're trying to Stoning to Death her, you sack her, draw 2, discard 1. They try to Thunder her, you do the same thing. They try to Stoning to Death another Resonator, you can do that. If they attack into another Resonator, you contribute it. The attack fizzles and you plus off that as well. She's just absolutely amazing and totally warrants her price. She's like around $10, and I think it's totally reasonable because of how good she is. It's one of the best cards in the meta right now. It fixes a lot that Red had a problem with it before. They would kind of just run out of resources, and she kind of helps you keep getting those. They also play Lancelot in this build. It's not Knights, however, it has the same kind of tempo curve. The whole idea is to use Guinevere turn 1, and then Lancelot turn 2, and then you can even do something like Flame King Shout with Snow White turn 3. The whole idea is to essentially just keep removing your board and go really, really heavy to your face with all these really strong Resonators that have really good stats. They also use cards like Necromancy of the Undead Lord and Arthur. You might be wondering why a Blazer would be using these in an aggro deck, but it's also once again to make up for the loss of, if this deck runs out of resources, it just dies because there's nothing they can do. And Arthur is recurring and so is Necromancy, so they use those to kind of try to mitigate. So Guinevere can discard Arthur or Necromancy to get it in the graveyard. You essentially just got a free +2 for the draw. And later on, Arthur can come back to your hand. And they play all black in this build with, of course, some red stones just in case Blazer dies. And Blazer produces red, so you have red all throughout the game. And so Necromancy is actually an extremely good meta call as well. I'll kind of get into why this is so amazing later on, but I don't think the +2/+2 is why it makes it so great. That's just an addition, but I'll talk about that in a sec. In this kind of scenario, other than maybe Arthur in this, which is the mitigate section, I'll move that over here. What you can notice about all of these cards is that, of course, Flame King Shout is a combo card, so they're most likely going to have to use Rootgate to search out the other piece, so Rootgate can grab the Snow White. Snow White is 700 defense, Lancelot is 600 defense, Guinevere discards. When building against my meta, I thought what can possibly be good against a 6/6, a 7/7, and something that can kill Guinevere or at least punish Guinevere for, kind of helping them plus. And I thought of the only card that I can think of that does this is Merlin. And so Merlin says when your opponent discards a card, you can flip him out of your chance standby area. And when he enters the field from your chance standby area, he does -700 to a Resonator your opponent controls. So think about it this way. Let's say if I have this in my chance standby, and this is their field, they swing with Lancelot, and I attempt to Stoning this, they're of course going to sack it for Guinevere to plus. The second they draw 2 and discard, I'm going to flip Merlin in and kill Guinevere, so they just lost both the Resonators anyway. It's still a 2-for-2 because my Stoning still got wasted, and they're still drawing, so Merlin killing this doesn't really, it's really good, but they still got to draw the cards. But now, once these are gone, they now have to use another card to destroy my Merlin, so that's going to be another resource they have to waste. It can block another Lancelot and they would trade. It can, you can't block against Snow White, but I actually have an answer for that as well. And once again, Merlin also, if you can force them to discard even outside Guinevere, Nyarlathotep or Spiral are really good ways to make your opponent discard. If you have a set Merlin, and they attacked with Snow White the turn before with Flame King Shout, and let's say wiped your, I have Lores, which is like the smallest Resonator I run, so, and like Rasputin's and stuff like that. So let's say they Flame King Shouted, killed all my monsters, summoned Snow White, attacked to my face, and I took the damage, blah blah blah, whatever. On my turn, if I go Spiral, they already used a 2-card combo, they're hands down by 2 cards. By turn 3, if you're playing it correctly, they should only have about 2 to 3 cards left in hand. So if you Spiral at this point, they're going to be left with around 1. You then flip in Merlin and kill Snow White. Because it is -7/-7, she's only 700 defense. So Merlin was one of the cards I decided I would use because it's just really good against anything of in the current meta stats-wise. The only thing it doesn't kill is Nyarlathotep, which is the other Blazer build that I'm going to get into. And of course Arthur, but I play Cthulhu's with these, and Hasters and Carmila's get rid of Arthur no problem. And the only problem is necromancy. Like I said, there's another method. I mean, there's another reason why this card is so good, and that's because Haster is really relevant right now. There's a Blazer Cthulhu deck that's really popular, and Haster says on enter you get to destroy a resonator with no addition. And so if they have Undead Lord on all their monsters, every time it's summoned and it equips onto their newest monster that you now have to deal with, you can't Haster it anymore. So it almost becomes a dead card in your hand, and it's really hard to get rid of equips because nobody mains kind of addition hate. Nor do I think you should at the moment. It's kind of easier to try to get this out of their graveyard with Fetal Movement sided or anything like that. But yeah, so this kind of has two purposes. It's an easy +2/+2. It mitigates for Guinevere, and it makes your opponent's Hasters really useless. So it's really, really good. Moving on to the Cthulhu some more. Cthulhus typically run cards around this nature. There's of course Rukeg and Guinevere in this build too, but I just want to talk about why these are so important in my meta anyway. So Rasputin says when this card's sent to the graveyard, you can pay 200 life to add it back to your hand. This is of course great because if you have, let's say, this in a Rukeg or this in a Guinevere and you sack it for Nyarlathotep, it goes back to your hand. You didn't really waste any resources. All you do is lose 200 life. And then you get to look at their hand and discard their most important card. And then maybe even follow up with the Spiral if you have the mana for it, because now they're just losing 3 cards out of their hand. This is I think the best type of Blazer build if you are looking to build Blazer and you like kind of like a control-y aspect of a deck more. I much rather prefer running something with these rather than the Knight version or the aggro version I was just talking about. There's just some you can't fight with any deck currently other than maybe like Rezard, which isn't really that much in the meta. You can't fight against having no hand. Having no hand beats every deck. I mean, the only card is one of the cards I'm also going to talk about to help mitigate this is if this is your meta and you don't want to play black, 4C is a really good card you could be running. So 4C lets you draw 2 cards. It's essentially Pot of Greed from Yu-Gi-Oh! Of course, it works a little differently because Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have mana to worry about. So, you can still play a bunch of cards after you draw the 2, but this one kind of uses up your 2 mana, but it's definitely worth it. A lot of the Cthulhu players do use cards like Haster and Carmilla, which of course on enter destroy a resonator, like I said. Carmilla also destroys a non-vampire on enter. So if their hand is full of these Hasters and Carmillas, and you're using a 4C, drawing into another 4C, using a 4C, and ending your turn, you now have your whole hand back essentially. And if they have a Haster or Carmilla in their hand and you don't have a field, you're still pretty much safe because they can't summon the Haster because it'll be forced to kill itself. They could summon the Carmilla, but then they're giving up an opportunity to kill one of the cards you drew. So sometimes if you're kind of keeping up tempo and you're fighting against their field very well, it's totally fine to just use your mana to draw and maybe come back next turn and not worry about it too much, because against this particular matchup, which is the only matchup that is discarding your hand this frequently, they don't really put a lot of damage on board anytime soon. So using a card like 4C, even though you are kind of locking yourself out of that churn, it's totally worth being able to do so much to churn after rather than just getting your whole hand discarded and not really having any answers. Moving on to another card I want to talk about that's really good against the aggro matchups is Underground Dragger. This isn't good in every single deck. I used it in Kaguya because it only cost 1, but a Rezard could really make use of this as well because he could put them in there with his enter. But what makes Underground Dragger so good is its effect is he can flip from your Chan standby area if a card you control has been sent to your graveyard, and that's the only requirement to flip him other than needing the Darkness Magic Stone. And when he enters the field, you can destroy, well, from your Chan standby area specifically, you can destroy a Resonator that's dealt damage this turn. So why this is so important is, once again, with those cards that a lot of people have been having problems with, stuff like Lancelot and Snow White, if they attack with Lancelot, and let's say I have Guinevere, and they pump this up to 1,000 and they do 700 to Guinevere, if I decide to take this 700, well, Guinevere is a bad example because you would sack it, but let's say I have a Rasputin and they want to get the damage in. So they attack with Lancelot, trying to deal 700 damage to Rasputin so that, it's destroyed and I take the 1,000 direct. The second the 700 is dealt to Rasputin and it hits the graveyard, I meet the requirement for a card being sent to the graveyard with Underground Dragger. I can now flip it to enter the field and destroy Lancelot before its damage goes through because all the requirements have been met. He did deal damage, even though it was with this effect. And then Lancelot dies, and now I have a 7/7 they have to deal with. And this cost me 1 essentially in Kaguya, or even 2 in Rezard is totally fine. I mean, it makes all your little stuff like this trade with the biggest stuff, and then you can even add this back to your hand, so you're not even minusing. And it's just, you can do a lot of crazy things with Underground Dragger, actually. Let's say your field is Lancelot and Snow White. Well, their field is Lancelot and Snow White, and you have a Rasputin, and they're tapped out of mana so they can't buff Lancelot. If they attempt to swing with Snow White to do 300 damage to Rasputin, and Rasputin dies, let's say you pay the 200 to add it back to your hand, and then you decide to take the 500 from Snow White. When they declare attack with Lancelot, you can flip in Underground Dragger at this moment because every requirement has been met. You destroy the Snow White that dealt the damage to you, and you decide to block the Lancelot. So this 6/6 is going to die to your 7/7, and then you're destroying Snow White with the effect. So you just used one card, and you're like puny like little Rasputin or Cheshire or whatever you use to block to kill those two cards, which are amazing cards. So if you properly play against your meta, it's really possible that these cards that seem not so great kind of in theory, or if you look at them originally, they don't seem so powerful. There's always ways to use them against your meta if you're doing it right, and it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Moving on to a couple more important cards, I think, that are going to be really relevant next format as well, or are pretty good this format too. Susanoo is one of them. The Dragon Sylvia is coming out, and she's really, really great. This card's going to be definitely really played. In our specific format now, if you are running Blazer in your deck, I think you should always have one of these mains since you can search it with Rook Egg. Because green isn't so dominant, not in my locals, once again, anything I use as an example, you can feel free to ask me any questions about, how I would do it against your locals if, let's say you're green heavy or, whatever color blue heavy. So for my specific locals, because we don't have green heavy and Zeke's isn't the card you see often, I'm totally fine with paying 6 for this, even if they pay no dragons, and just using it late game, because this card, even without Omni, can win you the game. If you're using Cthulhu Blazer and you're discarding their whole hand and they're top decking, if they summon like a little monster trying to stay alive, or they actually do summon something and kill something on your field and you need to catch up, and you just summon a Rook Egg and, I don't know, maybe just Gruus Blessed it to force kill it, or they attacked it the turn before and you search Susanoo and you just drop it, kill their field and swing for 12, there isn't really much they're going to be able to do to kind of mitigate that damage. If they don't top deck another kill spell or like a Carmilla or something, they're just going to continuously take the Pierce to the face, and it's just a great card. I mean, if Zeke's isn't in the format, I think one of this should always be mained. It's still really good against Guibers, it's still really good against Blazer, it's good against a Bahamut deck that you might see, so there's no reason I think to not to main this. I'd once again only do it in Blazer because you have the red all the way through, or of course if you have 10 redstones that's okay too, but a lot of people that don't play Blazer only have, like my Kaguya deck only has 4 dark red, so I don't like using 3 red cards when I can't for sure have that many by turn 6. You never know if you just hit like, mono stones and a little redstone and a Gruus Blessed or something and never see the red, so I don't like maining it. But if you main Blazer and you have all the red, I definitely main Susanoo. I just think this card's really good. And then Dead Scythe is a really good card too. The 28 Regalia Kane deck, I just lost to it at my locals when I won this mat actually at the last event. The only loss I had all day was to that Kane deck. I sided Blazer and Dead Scythe, and I didn't see them after mulliganing 5. I then Guinevere 2 times game 2 and 3, and I still didn't get into Dead Scythe, so both games I mulled 5 and Guinevere twice and I didn't see it. So she just absolutely destroyed me. She was like attacking for like 2500 at once, so I just couldn't really do anything. And so Dead Scythe's always really good too. I like having Blazer and Dead Scythe sided. You never know. Rush is always still really good in the red ruler kind of aspect. Bahamut and Kane and all those rulers are still really, really relevant. So I like having at least a side deck for it. So if you have the space for it, I definitely always side Blazer and Dead Scythe. And then Fetal Movement is a card that's really good right now. I don't think it's too necessary next format because you have Dark Alice, and people that know the way I play know I like to side a lot of rulers. And even if I do keep playing Kaguya after the new set drops, I'm definitely going to side Dark Alice. I think her specific graveyard removal is just too great. You can finally remove stuff like the equip spell I was talking about earlier, the Necromancy. There it is. So you can remove stuff like this from the graveyard. You can remove stuff like Arthur. Of course, if they have 3 resonators in the graveyard, you can chain Arthur's effect, banishing the 3 and add it to your hand to avoid the Dark Alice effect. But you can always just during draw, banish all of their resonators from their graveyard that you can with however much mana you have, and then when they play Arthur, you kill it. He won't have any targets in the graveyard, and then you can banish it. So there's ways to just to avoid him escaping the effect, but because we don't have Dark Alice right now, I think Fetal Movement's really good, especially because in my meta, because Cthulhu Blazer is a thing. Their graveyard often fills up with Rasputins that they just end up discarding for Guinevere, with Lauras that they keep searching to keep incarnating, and then the monsters like Carmilla and stuff that end up dying after killing your monsters. And so they're really grave heavy, so they can always use monster heavy in the grave, so they can always use the Arthurs, and then it also means you're doing more damage with Fetal Movement. So please note that for Fetal Movement, the card says it's 100 for every card in the graveyard, but it's actually for every Resonator. It's been errated, so that's why I said it matters that the graveyard is Resonator heavy, because you're actually doing more damage that way too. So once again, it's only 100 damage for every Resonator removed, but it does remove every single card. So that's another good example as well. Flame of the Outer World is one of the other ones. I'm no longer running Thunder in this format. I don't think Thunder is a good card right now. It doesn't kill anything because Snow White's 700, Lancelot's 600. Those are cards we see often. Hitting anything smaller than that right now, like a Familiar of Holy Wind in a green deck or anything, wouldn't be worth using the Thunder against. I mean, most of the time they can even just chase the effect and maybe hit like one of your monsters with the 300 anyway. So I'd much rather stick with Stoning because it's a guaranteed destruction, and Flame of the Outer World because it stops their Guinevere's from using their effect. They can't chase this, so it's really good. It's also really good because it hits J-Rulers, of course, so stuff like Kane and stuff that's really relevant. It kills those unless they have Maribel's up. And even then, in my matchup against 28 Kane, I won game 1 when I hadn't sided yet. And it's because she had 2 Maribels up, and so her Kane was only taking 400 damage from this, but I had 2 of them, so I just hit her with it twice, and her Kane died anyway. And so it's always going to be a good card. Even with Maribel out, it's just, if you can double up on them, you're still killing almost any rulers, so it's totally fine to always run Flame. There's no reason not to. And then lastly, another example of my meta is the Blazer, the Eater of Dimensions. This is kind of a double-edged sword in my opinion. The decks that run this also run Arthur, because Arthur can banish it from the graveyard to add itself to the hand, and then you can play the Blazer later on for free. But if it is on the field, if it's on the field with Arthur, it goes down to 9/9, which is like not intimidating at all. Especially if you're because I use Carmilla's and they have Arthur, it becomes 10/10, so I get a free block on Blazer, and it just makes it not so threatening anymore. But it is just, extra pressure that they get for free every turn, so it's not the worst option. I also think Blazer is good to side against the Cthulhu decks. Anytime if they top deck Rasputin's late game and they're just trying to use it as chump blockers, you can make sure that it doesn't hit the graveyard so it doesn't come back. Their late game Rook Eggs don't work. Their late game, just anything that tries to hit the graveyard just doesn't work, which is always really, really good. So I think it's always important to run a card like Blazer as well. It's just really, really good. Blazer banishing is really important right now. I mean, removing from the game is really important right now. There's just so much that the meta is using in my locals once again. That hits the grave, so that this is really good. If they, let's say, have a Haster that they used against you with the Necromancy on it, and they got to attack, there it is. So, and they got to attack the turn before, and you can just summon Blazer and crash into it. They're not only losing the Necromancy permanently because it gets removed from the game, but they're also losing their Haster, which could have been an Arthur target. They also use Deadman Prince, so making them not have Deadman Prince targets is really good as well. Same thing with Fetal Movement. If you chain it to Deadman Prince, he's missing his target, so it's always really strong. So I hope this kind of helps everyone out. It's once again an example of my locals, but I want you guys to see the logic behind why certain cards were used and why they weren't. Underground Dragger and Merlin, I think, were really good examples of why some cards that don't seem so strong might be strong in certain metas because of how good they are against those cards. These cards also, of course, like I said, discarding your opponent's hand is always going to be extremely strong. The only matchup you have to worry about is a matchup that runs 3 to 4 4Cs, because they can come back from your spirals and your Nayas. But it's still not so bad, because if you can get a Naya off early in the game and look at their hand and discard the 4C, your spirals are more alive as well now. And then a lot of times water decks also have cards like if they're using white-blue, they have the Alice, the Guardian, and she's 7/7, so Merlin kills that as well. Of course, if she has the mana up, she can make herself untargetable, but you, of course, have to plan accordingly. Underground Dragger kills a lot of decks. Anything that does damage to your Rasputin is essentially just getting traded off for dying, and then now they have to deal with the 7/7. So that's always really good as well. If you guys have any specific questions about your locals and you want to leave a comment in the comment section below, totally feel free to do that. I'll get back to you if I can. I hope this video kind of helped you decide on what certain side deck cards could be good against these meta decks, and what you can kind of do to identify these cards. And if you guys haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do, because it makes my videos come directly straight to you guys, so you guys don't have to go searching for it or waiting for it on the Facebook group. And I'll definitely catch you guys next time.